Hi, welcome back. We are here talking about Kindred some more because it's a great book that deserves to be talked about. Our topic is the central conceit of time travel. This is the main mechanism that makes this story work. And I want to talk a little bit about how it works, how it's different from maybe other time travel stories that we have, and why it was necessary for this book to do what Octavia Butler wanted to do with this book, that she use time travel. So why don't we get into that? Okay, so time travel. I love time travel stories. I really like them. Books, movies, TV show, anywhere where people travel back in time and they have to deal with, even forward in time also, where they have to deal with a culture or a situation which is very alien to them, but where sometimes their choices may affect themselves in the future. I enjoy that. I don't know, I just enjoy that conceit. It's kind of fun for me. And I've been enjoying them since I was a kid. And so Butler, when I read this book, Butler has done time travel very differently. Most of the other time travel stories that I've read, there's a device or a thing, right? There's a little silver egg, or there's a DeLorean, or there's a big blue police box, or something like that. There is a thing which enables time travel, and to one degree or another, the traveler is in control of their journeys. Sure, the machine might break or malfunction, but by and large, the person who is time traveling has chosen to travel through time. This is not the case in Kindred. Basically, Dana, living in 1976 in California, is drawn back to antebellum Maryland. So she's traveling through time and space. From her point of view, at least at the very beginning, and actually through the whole book, it is involuntary. She has no choice in when she goes back, under what circumstances she goes back. She could go at any time. And what she discovers is that she is being drawn back to her ancestor, this guy Rufus Whalen. And she's drawn back to every time that he is in mortal danger. So the first time is when he's a young child and he falls into a river and he nearly drowns. And Dana shows up there. She rescues him, performs CPR on him, despite her mother thinking, the boy's mother thinking that she's trying to kill him. And she resuscitates him. And then his father shows up with a shotgun and she pops back to 1976. So from her perspective in 76, she doesn't know when this is going to happen to her. She always has to be prepared that at any moment she's going to have to go back in time. And at a certain point, she starts gathering together a go bag, and her husband helps as well, but creating a bag she can just keep with her at all times that has some supplies and, of course, a big-ass knife that she can keep herself safe with. And so that in and of itself is a really interesting burden to put onto a character, right? That at any moment you could be put into an entirely new time and place and context, which is alien to you. So I think that alone is a really, really interesting use of time travel. And it speaks to Butler as a writer that she wants her protagonist to be without so much control. That the one thing that Dana can do is when she's brought back in time, she's like, okay, I can figure this out. I can live here, but I have no real control over when or how I move. So I think that's fascinating, and it's really, really cool, and it's a nice treat for us from Octavia Butler. That brings up the question of why is time travel even necessary for this book? I've got my partner doesn't like time travel stories. As far as he's concerned, time travel, when you start introducing time travel, when you're like fixing the past and doing all this stuff, it ultimately, he believes it kind of devalues a lot of what's happening in the story. I disagree, but oh well. But that's a fair question, right? When a writer is going to decide to do a time travel story, you have to ask, well, okay, why? Is it possible to do this story without time travel? Is it possible to remove that layer of complexity from the book and just write something more straightforward? And of course, the answer is no. You can't take away the time travel and have the same book. You would have a very different book. You would have a book that Butler wasn't trying to write. The book that Butler was trying to write is the one with time travel in it. So you kind of got to keep that. So I think one of the big things that allowed Butler to do was to explore the, let's call it for the sake of argument, real past. She did a lot of research about the times of enslavement. She read slave diaries. She read about what it was like to live on a plantation, what it was like to live under the overseers and under the condition of being owned as property. And I think she wanted to explore that, but she also, in a sense, is acknowledging the fact that she, writing in the mid 70s, never lived under those circumstances, that she had no firsthand knowledge of them and no firsthand experience of them, like a lot of people of, well, most people of her generation, every person of her generation did not experience slavery. And I think she kind of wanted to explore the gap between what she thinks she knows about being an enslaved person versus what the reality of that was, right? We all, those of us living in the modern age, might think about those times and we would say, well, if I lived during those times, I would make different choices. I would do the right thing. But would you, though? Because do you really know everything there is to know? Do you really understand everything there is to understand about that context and what choices are available to you? Or what, at least what safe choices are available to you? Sure, I, as a white guy, could safely go back. And at a certain point in the book, her husband, Dana's husband, a white guy, does go back. And I could survive in the early 1800s, but at what cost? If I want to, say, help the Underground Railroad, if I want to help slaves escape, there is very, very real danger in that for me. And how much danger am I willing to undertake? Sure, in the 21st century, I can look at it and go, yes, I would be there. It'd be me and Harriet, and we'd be taking slaves up the Underground Railroad. But if I suddenly found myself there, I might just quietly fade into obscurity, be like, nope. I do not want an enraged slave patrol coming after me with rifles. That's dangerous. Ooh, sorry, Harriet. It's a lot to ask. I think, yeah, the time travel conceit sort of allowed Butler to do that, explore this gap between what we think we know and the way things really were. And Dana exemplifies that throughout the whole book. Dana shows, again, she herself, as a black woman living in the 70s, had a academic understanding of what the times of slavery were like, and then she gets thrust into it, and there's a lot she does not understand. She makes a lot of dumb mistakes very, very quickly when she's put back in the past, and she needs to adapt very, very fast or die. And I think what it also does is to humanize the people of the past. There are plenty of wonderful pieces of slave literature, of writings from people who lived as enslaved people. And honestly, I think the more of those stories get out, the better. I think the more we hear from people who lived under these circumstances, the better it can be, because we need to know how bad this was so that we don't forget how bad this was. There are already people in the U.S. who are forgetting how bad slavery was. And they are starting to say, well, it wasn't that bad. They had homes and they had clothes. And they learned somebody who said they learned a trade. They learned a trade making barrels or shoes or whatever it was that they were. And I think from our point of view in the 21st century, we might forget it was bad. It was not good. It was double plus ungood, being a slave. And I think, again, Butler allows us to sort of explore that idea. And then, of course, how our attitudes have changed over the past almost 200 years or so. 150 if you want to say cut off when this book was written. But yeah, it kind of forces us to examine our preconceptions about those times and how we, again, like I said, how we think we would have behaved. Now, I mentioned that Dana has no control over her time travel. She has no time machine or time device or time stopper or whatever it is that she has. So why is it necessary that Dana not have control? Why does Butler do this to poor Dana? I know sometimes writers feel a little bit bad about what they do to their main characters. I've written main characters that I feel really bad for, and I think, I'm a terrible person for having put them through this. Why did Butler do it? Why was it necessary for this book, for the story that Butler is telling, that Dana have no control? Well, I think part of it is that Butler seems to have a fondness for the idea of the survival hero. A hero who is not necessarily prepared for what they're going into and has to make a lot of hard choices in order to get through the particular ordeal that they are through. For Dana, that means she's showing up in 18-something Maryland thinking she has rights. The 1970s was a very progressive era for all that there was. In the U.S., there were civil rights acts that had been recently enacted, which allowed black people and other non-white minorities to have fuller use of their rights, to be able to vote, to be able to hopefully exist. And I mean, we've seen how well that worked out, but nevertheless, this was major legislation that was intended to help correct some of the wrongs of the past to one degree or another. Women had been gaining more rights as well. In 1974, they were allowed to finally get a credit card under their own name, open a bank account without their husband's signature in the U.S. and many states in the U.S. as well. The ability to control their bodies was formally, for a while anyway, made constitutional, right? So women and minorities in the U.S. were getting more freedoms and liberties than they had before. Dana, of course, is the combination of both. She's at the intersection of this. So Dana thinks she has rights when she goes back, and she really, really quickly learns that if she acts like a black woman of 1976, she will die. She will get killed in antebellum Maryland, which means that she needs to fall in line real quick. She needs to learn how to behave in such a way that is contrary to how she's lived, that is contrary to the life that she knows and the freedoms that she has gained. And that's real hard. How do you do that? How many of pieces of yourself are you willing to give up in exchange for physical safety? That's a hard question to answer. And we see throughout the whole book, we see Dana doing that. Every now and again, at certain points of the book, she's kind of trading away one more bit of 1976 Dana in order to achieve her goal, which is either for her to live, certainly, but also to not get her new friends and, sort of substitute family on the plantation in trouble as well. She's trying to help them, but she can't do it as a woman from 1976. She has to do it as a woman of 1918 or 1920 something. 1818 or 1820 something, getting my dates mixed up. So it is a story about loss of control. There's also a very important decision that Butler made, which is that Dana's not just getting sent back to any old place and time in the past. She is getting sent back to her ancestor, Rufus Wayland. And it is interesting that Rufus Wayland is a white man. And so we're kind of introducing into that idea that there are a lot of people living today whose ancestors were enslaved people on plantations, who probably can trace their ancestry back to a slave owner, because it was not uncommon for slave owners to have children on their female slaves. And it was certainly not uncommon for this. So she is there to protect her own ancestor, who by all rights is a slave owner and a person you might not want to protect, especially if you are egregiously anti-slavery. So it is very personal for her as well. It's not just she's going back to the past, she's going back to protect herself, because of course if Rufus dies, she turns into that whole Back to the Future photograph thing and vanishes. Maybe, I don't know how Butler would have resolved that. Well, actually we do kind of know, but anyway, so it's very, very personal for her. It is her loss of control and her need to figure out what she's going to do about this. She's not trying to save the world. She's not trying to end slavery. She's just trying to survive and trying to get through long enough to make sure that her great-great-something grandmother is born. That's all it is. And then in her final trip, she comes back without an arm, or more to the point, she comes back with one of her arms kind of melded into the wall, and it has to be removed. And it's a wonderful bit of symbolism, I guess, that the past and the present are one, in a sense. That the things that happened in the past, even 150, 200 years ago, are going to have an effect on us in the present. And we kind of can't ignore that. To that point, Butler, in an interview that I found, said this about the whole, Dana losing an arm. She said, "I couldn't really let her come all the way back. I couldn't let her return to what she was. I couldn't let her come back whole." And that, I think, really symbolizes her not coming back whole. Antebellum slavery didn't leave people quite whole. And so, Dana comes back with an arm missing. And that, in a sense, is that not just as an individual, she had something taken away from her, but if you want, we could expand that to black people in America for generations have lost something by having their people been enslaved for hundreds of years in the U.S. There is something missing that they can't get back and are going to have to sort of learn to function without. What that is, I don't know. I mean, I can't say. I think there are scholars in Black history who might be able to say what it is. And I don't want to kind of make any real speculations, because I have a feeling that if I say something like, oh yes, they took away your dignity, it kind of implies that Black people today don't have dignity. But of course, Black people today do have dignity, so that was silly. But nevertheless, there is something missing. There is something that got some injury that was put on the Black community of the US especially, that I don't think they can really ignore. And it's always going to be there. And I think Dana, in that sense, really represents that very well. She's never going to have that arm back. And that's always going to be a reminder of the horrors that she went through. And so I think there's a very complicated metaphor going on here, which my brain hasn't quite resolved yet. But if you've got it, please let me know. I will be happy to learn more about this. So one last thought about time travel, and then I'll let you go, which is time travel is very often science fiction. Like I said, there's a device of some sort that allows someone to travel through time. But this book, even she said, this is not science fiction. Again, Butler is a science fiction writer, but even she said Kindred is fantasy, because there is no science involved. It just happens. We don't know why. We don't know what the mechanic is. We don't know if there's some entity that decided Dana has to go back in time to save her great whatever grandfather. We don't know. We never know. We're never told. It's kind of like the movie Groundhog Day. We don't know why that guy keeps repeating the day over and over again. He just does. And the same thing for Dana. She just keeps going back in time. Whose idea was this? No idea. Does this happen to a lot of people in this world? Is this sort of a common feature of this world? Not as far as I can tell, but hey, maybe Dana's just the first. Maybe if she's successful with it, the world will decide to allow other people to do it. I don't know. But so as a time travel book, it is interesting. It is very unusual. It's different, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. So I hope that you have some thoughts on time travel and on the use of time travel in Kindred, and I look forward to hearing them. So feel free to chime in and tell me what you think I missed, what bits you think I dropped. And again, if you have any really good insight into that crazy central metaphor I started building and then I walked away from really quickly before it jengaed all the way to the floor, I'd be happy to hear from you as well. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.